Good evening. I'm Professor Sleepington, your guide through the least thrilling lives ever lived. Tonight's subject? Oh, it's a biography so profoundly uneventful, so magnificently monotonous, it might just cure your insomnia for good. You, see, we'll be exploring the life of Elon Musk. Yes, that Elon Musk, the one whose name now conjures up visions of rockets, electric cars, and late-night Twitter monologues. But fear not, we'll be unpacking his life, not in blinding flashes of innovation or scandal, but in a slow, meticulous drizzle of facts. Forget excitement. This story unfolds so slowly, you'll feel like you're aging with it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and check if you are subscribed to the channel, because several viewers of the channel are complaining that YouTube is removing their subscriptions. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And do leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It always delights me to know how far drowsy storytelling can travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin tonight's sleepy descent into mediocrity. It begins, as most things do, with a birth. June 28th, 1971, Pretoria, South Africa. A Tuesday. Not that the day matters much, except that some of us find Tuesdays to be emotionally neutral, which suits this tale well. Elon Reeve Musk was born to Mae Musk, a dietitian slash model slash small town celebrity, and Errol Musk, an engineer slash safari whisperer slash potentially troublesome dinner guest. These were not ordinary parents, unless your definition of ordinary includes flying lessons, emerald mines, and a peculiar appetite for amateur electromechanical repairs. Elon's early life was quiet in the way that childhoods with complicated parental dynamics and encyclopedias for bedtime stories tend to be. His house had a lot of books. Like, a lot. Legend. Well, family accounts suggest he read 2 a day. This is either an incredible feat or the byproduct of not being invited to birthday parties. Probably both. He was not what you'd call a playful child. He didn't chase dogs, or make mud pies, or prank his neighbors. Instead, he preferred to sit and think for hours, sometimes entire days. He was known to zone out so completely that people thought something was wrong with him. Turns out, he was just processing the entire history of space travel in his head, as one does. Historians still argue whether this intense childhood introversion was the result of a naturally inquisitive mind or the sheer boredom of 1970s Pretoria suburbia. Either way, it was a vibe. While most children of the era were marveling at disco balls and Pac-Man, young Elon was leafing through physics textbooks and designing fictional cities in his head, entire metropolises, complete with power grids and public transport. All this before he had armpit hair. Let's pause here and observe. At this point, there were no rockets, no Teslas, no flamethrowers. Just a boy, a lot of silence, and a growing awareness that life might be more interesting elsewhere. Maybe in America, maybe on Mars. But for now, he was in Pretoria, surrounded by dusty roads, gently wilting trees, and the gentle hum of lawnmowers slicing through an otherwise static world. Of course, family life had its quirks. His mother, May, was glamorous in that understated model on a cereal box way. She balanced nutrition with poise, even as her son asked questions like, how do black holes evaporate? Over breakfast. Errol, on the other hand, was complicated, a man of varied talents and even more varied reputations. One could say he was the kind of father who inspired ambition by making home the kind of place you wanted to escape from. A mainstream historical fact for you: during the 1970s, South Africa was under apartheid. Elon's household, while relatively privileged, existed within a deeply segregated society. It's unclear how much this affected his worldview at the time, but it's worth noting that he would later speak out, though not always clearly, about injustice and inequality. Now, for your quirky fringe tidbit, Elon's maternal grandfather once flew a single-engine plane across the entire African continent just for fun, which may explain something about the family's relationship to danger and logic. Back in Elon's room, the wallpaper may have been beige. We don't know for sure, but it feels like it should have been. He'd lie in bed imagining satellites and Martian bases, while the other children were likely thinking about pudding or kicking things. His heroes weren't cowboys or footballers. They were Isaac Asimov and Nikola Tesla. He didn't collect baseball cards. He collected ideas. He also learned early on that being the smart one wasn't a shortcut to social acceptance, which sets us up ever so gently for the next phase of his life: the bruises, the brain power, and the Battle of Pretoria Middle School. But that comes later. For now, the boy is still small, still hunched over some tattered paperback, absorbing knowledge like a sponge that knows it'll be squeezed into usefulness someday. As the sun sets over suburban South Africa, one can imagine little Elon staring at the ceiling, considering the weight of the universe, or perhaps just calculating how many days it would take to reach Pluto by bicycle. And the house, still filled with books and tension, creaks ever so slightly in the wind. Pretoria, though sun-drenched and fairly tranquil on the surface, was not particularly kind to a boy like Elon Musk. He was small for his age, soft-spoken, fond of science fiction and computers, two things that, at the time, held less social currency than, say, rugby or casually vandalizing bicycles. And so, the bullying began. Elon attended Waterkloof House Preparatory School, a name that evokes quaint charm and stiff uniforms. Unfortunately, it also came with a student body fond of hierarchy, particularly the kind maintained by fists and locker-related intimidation. Elon, with his peculiar way of speaking, half South African English, half robot downloaded a dictionary, did not fit in. One might say he stuck out like a carbon fiber chassis in a parking lot of 1970s Toyotas. He was beaten up more than once. There was one particularly memorable incident, though perhaps not for Elon, who may have temporarily lost consciousness, where he was pushed down a staircase and subsequently hospitalized. His attackers were, reportedly, indifferent. One must admire their consistency. Historians still argue whether this period of persistent pummeling is what gave Musk his characteristic emotional armor, or whether he was simply born with it, like a turtle who learned to code. What we do know is that Elon did not respond to violence with violence. He responded with more reading. Truly, an act of defiance only the nerdiest could admire. While his classmates flexed muscles, he flexed neurons. He devoured the works of Tolkien, Clarke, Heinlein, and Asimov, not for fun, necessarily, but because they described worlds governed by logic, invention, and the occasional galactic empire. It's said that he could recite long passages from The Lord of the Rings, which, while impressive, did little to reduce the number of wedgies he received. But hey, at least he knew Elvish insults. At home, things were equally complicated. His parents divorced when Elon was 9. He chose to live with his father, Errol, though that choice, in retrospect, seems less like a decision and more like a misunderstanding. Errol's household was described by Elon as emotionally abusive. He later called his father a terrible human being, no punchline required. Errol was a successful engineer, yes, but also prone to making statements at dinner that required legal disclaimers. Their home life was quiet, in the way a bomb defusal workshop is quiet. Technically so, but with an undercurrent of peril. Conversations were often one-sided. Emotions were neatly repressed. Empathy may have been considered a design flaw, and yet Elon endured. He studied. He built things. He took apart electronics for fun. Sometimes he put them back together. Other times, he just left them in pieces, like abstract sculptures of his inner turmoil. A mainstream historical fact for your consideration. By the 1980s, the personal computer revolution was beginning to ripple even into the more remote corners of the globe. Elon's first interaction with a computer came at the age of 10. It was a Commodore VIC-20, a machine with roughly the processing power of a confused hamster, but enough to open the doors of programming to a young boy with more curiosity than friends. He taught himself to code. By age 12, he had written a game called Blastar, which involved spaceships and lasers, and was, by most accounts, deeply unimpressive. He sold it for $500 to a computer magazine. This, by the way, would be the last time Musk was paid so little for software. One might expect this early success to have changed his social fortunes. It did not. If anything, it made things worse. The other children, already suspicious of his vocabulary and lack of eye contact, now had actual proof that he was a certified weirdo. He endured their derision with a stoic face and possibly a little internal plotting. But no revenge was taken, no gadgets deployed, no counter-programming of the school bell system, just more reading, more thinking, more quietly storing memories for future use, like a squirrel hoarding acorns of ambition. His younger brother Kimball, by contrast, was more outgoing, more socially agile, less prone to existential brooding. The two were close, but different. Elon was the storm cloud hovering over a schematic. Kimball, the cheerful breeze that occasionally brought sandwiches. And so the years passed, slowly, predictably, with Elon growing taller, slightly less awkward, and increasingly obsessed with the idea of escaping. Not just his school, or his home, or his country, but the entire human condition, preferably via rocket. Quirky tidbit time. Young, Elon once built a homemade rocket in his backyard. It didn't fly very far. It mostly just startled a neighbor's dog and left a scorch mark on the lawn. But the intention was clear. Up, always up. His teachers described him as bright but distant, a brilliant student who asked questions they couldn't answer and didn't particularly enjoy trying. He once asked a science teacher why people weren't colonizing Mars already. The teacher reportedly blinked several times and changed the subject to photosynthesis. By the time Elon reached his teenage years, he was already considering his next move, not toward college, but toward the stars, or at least toward North America, where science fiction felt slightly less fictional. The bruises healed. The memories didn't, but they became fuel. Soon, he would leave Pretoria behind. He would trade sun for snow, childhood for chaos, and monotony for a new, frostbitten chapter of mediocrity. But first, there was paperwork to be done, and a plane to catch. Elon Musk's first real flirtation with financial gain came not through lemonade stands or mowing lawns. Those were far too analog. But by coding a video game no one would play. The game was called Blastar, and it was about as thrilling as its title suggests. You controlled a spaceship. You shot things. Things exploded. Points were awarded. That was the entirety of it. Elon wrote it in BASIC, which, despite its name, was about as user-friendly as a brick with buttons. He was 12. 12. While other boys were trying to light farts on fire or sneak peeks at contraband magazines, Elon was typing strings of primitive code into a screen that flickered like it had seasonal allergies. He sold the game for $500, a sum that made him briefly wealthier than most of his classmates, and almost as smug. The magazine that bought it ran a short write-up, and then the game was largely forgotten. Forgotten, that is, by everyone except Elon, who would reference it for the next 4 decades as proof that his path was preordained. Historians still argue whether Blastar was genuinely a precursor to a tech empire or just a fancier form of youthful procrastination. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps that is the magic of origin stories. They only gain meaning in retrospect. By now, Elon had become increasingly aware that South Africa was not quite the environment for someone who spent weekends trying to reverse engineer how satellites worked. He dreamed of the United States, which, through the lens of science fiction and glossy TV commercials, appeared to be a nation entirely composed of neon lights, inventors, and boundless opportunity. But first, Canada. Why Canada? Because his mother, Mai, had Canadian citizenship. This meant he could apply for a Canadian passport and, in theory, leapfrog his way to the United States. A clever loophole, one that required, you guessed it, paperwork. So, in 1989, at the age of 17, Elon packed his bags and left for the Great White North. He had a suitcase, a cousin's address, and what was likely a tragically impractical jacket. One imagines him disembarking the plane in Winnipeg, or some equally frigid locale, blinking into a snowstorm, wondering whether this was the brave new world of innovation he had been promised, or simply a colder version of Pretoria, with fewer friends. Mainstream historical fact: Canada, during the late 80s and early 90s, was welcoming a new wave of immigrants with a particular focus on educated English-speaking applicants. Elon, with his peculiar talents and lack of criminal record, fit the mold quite well. He settled into life there with the same enthusiasm he brought to debugging code, grudgingly, precisely, and without excessive socializing. The first few months were spent working odd jobs, truly odd. He cleaned out boilers in lumber mills. He shoveled grain. At one point, he reportedly removed asbestos from industrial rooftops for $18 an hour, an amount high enough to convince a teenager that carcinogens were just a misunderstood seasoning. It's important to remember here that Elon was not at this point building anything. He was absorbing, observing, gathering intel, possibly plotting. He attended Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, a place known more for its limestone buildings than its contributions to space exploration. Still, it offered him something he hadn't had in years, a fresh start. There, he met Justine Wilson, a fellow student and future author of vampire novels, and eventually, Musk's first wife. Their early relationship was marked by intense discussions of literature, science, and what it's like to date someone who has already scheduled their career path on a spreadsheet. Elon transferred after 2 years to the University of Pennsylvania, taking his oddball intellect and his mounting ambitions south of the border. This, finally, was the America he had imagined. Ivy League buildings, academic rigor, and the faint aroma of startup culture wafting in the distance like a $5 billion food truck. Quirky tidbit, while at Penn, Elon rented a 10-bedroom house with a roommate and turned it into an impromptu nightclub on weekends. They charged $5 at the door. Musk claims he didn't party much himself. He was too busy making sure the speakers didn't explode. A metaphor, perhaps, for his entire life. At Penn, he double majored in physics and economics, two fields that, when combined, produce either a tech mogul or someone with very confusing dinner party stories. He also took courses at the Wharton School, further sharpening the edges of a personality already described by many as intense and confusingly ambitious. He was not known for charm. He was not known for warmth, but he was known. Professors recalled his relentless curiosity. Classmates noted his complete disinterest in anything that didn't directly align with his goals. He was already talking about space travel, about colonizing Mars, about electric cars and clean energy, and how bad public transit was. People listened, sort of. Some laughed. Most nodded politely and slowly backed away. Still, there was an undeniable current beneath his awkwardness, a sense that this wasn't just a smart kid. This was a person who believed with near religious fervor that he had a mission, not a metaphorical one, a literal, planetary mission, something to do with the survival of the human species and battery-powered acceleration curves. Historians still argue whether this messianic undertone was genuine or performative. Was he trying to save the world or just win at it? Perhaps, again, the answer is both. Or perhaps that's giving him too much credit and not enough caffeine. At any rate, by the time he graduated, Elon Musk was ready, not for a nap. He's famously opposed to sleep, but for the next phase, building a company from nothing, possibly in a tiny apartment, definitely using a dial-up modem. But before we get there, let's pause. The snow in Canada has melted. The UPenn dorms have gone quiet. Somewhere, a small boy who once read 2 books a day has become a young man with a folder labeled World Domination, and the cursor on his computer blinks patiently, like us. And so, with 2 degrees, a mild case of social disconnection, and a head full of orbital ambitions, Elon Musk found himself standing at the edge of a grand American metaphor, California. It was 1995. The air smelled faintly of startup sweat, burnt coffee, and misplaced optimism. Silicon Valley was in full digital bloom, and Musk arrived like a tech-obsessed Dorothy, stepping into a beige Oz made entirely of code and fax machines. But let's back up half a step, because even the most mundane legends must obey the laws of bureaucracy. To emigrate from South Africa to Canada to the United States in the early 90s was less a journey of daring escape and more a symphony of form-filling, finger-crossing, and polite immigration officers who were never quite sure what to do with someone who listed colonize Mars under long-term goals. Historians still argue whether Musk's exact immigration path was strategic genius or just an unusually efficient way to avoid South African military service. Regardless, it worked. Canada provided the opening. Penn provided the stepping stone. America provided the blank canvas. He was now, officially, a man with legal status and an overwhelming sense of purpose. Elon's younger brother, Kimball Musk, had also come to the U.S., and together they did what many ambitious siblings do when left unsupervised. They started a company. The year was still 1995, and the World Wide Web had only recently begun transitioning from a strange academic toy to something your dad might accidentally click on while trying to open solitaire. This new company would eventually be called Zip2, and it began with all the thrilling chaos of a small rented office space with a single computer and a mattress on the floor. There was no funding, no snacks, no server room, just 2 brothers, 1 blinking screen, and a dream so uninspiring it barely made it past the local deli. What was Zip2, you ask? Well, strap in. It helped newspapers go online. Yes, really. That's the plot. Zip2 created digital city guides and directory software for newspapers. Think of it as Yelp. If Yelp had no photos, no stars, and the emotional appeal of a filing cabinet. Elon, of course, was the technical one. He wrote the code, slept under his desk, ate at awkward intervals. Kimball handled business development, which is startup speak for talked to people without making them uncomfortable. They knocked on doors, called local papers, explained what the internet was, and slowly they began to land clients. By 1996, they had employees, investors, a growing list of partners. It was all terribly linear and practical. There were no scandals, no explosions, no robots or neural links, just long hours and terrible coffee. Mainstream historical fact, Zip2 received funding from Mower Davidow Ventures, a venture capital firm that saw potential in Elon's awkward brilliance. They gave the Musks money, real money, and with it came something much worse, adult supervision. The VCs quickly realized that while Elon was a talented coder, He was not exactly management material. His idea of leadership involved long monologues about space colonization and refusing to compromise on anything, ever. So, they did what VCs always do when faced with a visionary who also happens to be exhausting. They brought in a CEO. The new CEO was rich in ties, golf metaphors, and PowerPoint skills. Elon was, understandably, displeased. He was demoted to Chief Technology Officer, a title which translates roughly to guy who stays up until 3 a.m. muttering about servers. Still, Zip2 grew. Slowly, methodically. It wasn't sexy, but it was effective. By 1999, the company was sold to Compaq for $307 million. Yes, Compaq. Ask your grandparents. Elon's share? Around $22 million. A sum so large, it could have purchased several medium-sized islands or one spectacularly underperforming yacht. And here's the quirky tidbit. Elon reportedly bought a McLaren F1 with his Zip2 money, a car so fast and so expensive it came with its own metaphors. He famously showed it off to a CNN camera crew, saying, "There are only 62 of these in the world." A short time later, he crashed it. Because of course he did. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before the crash, before the millions, before the electric cars and Mars fantasies, there was a young immigrant entrepreneur living off ramen noodles and mainlining JavaScript into the night. He wasn't famous. He wasn't even particularly well liked. But he was tireless. He didn't vacation. He didn't party. He didn't sleep much, allegedly because sleep was inefficient. This, by the way, is not a sustainable worldview. But at 24, with more ideas than rest cycles, it worked. Historians still argue whether Zip2 was Elon's training ground or simply a lucky break. Was he already a genius in the making, or just a particularly intense guy who happened to land in the right place at the right time? Either way, the sale of Zip2 did more than make Elon rich. It made him restless, because now he had capital. Now he had leverage. And now, tragically for the rest of us, he had time to think about financial infrastructure. Because what could possibly follow online newspaper directories? Why, banking, of course. But before that strange chapter of digital dollars and hostile takeovers begins, let's let this scene breathe. A young man walks out of his office building, his brain buzzing with TCP/IP protocols and mild resentment. In his hand, the keys to a $1 million supercar. In his heart, an unspeakable desire to reinvent how money works. And somewhere, a paperboy shrugs, because newspapers are still a thing. For now. By the time Elon Musk began shuffling colleges like a distracted poker player, he had already demonstrated a strong aversion to standing still, both figuratively and, if you believe former classmates, literally. He walked quickly, talked quickly, and pivoted through academic institutions as if higher education were a series of stepping stones placed just far enough apart to justify frequent shoe changes. Let us first address Queen's University, that charming slice of Canadian academia nestled in the cold, limestone-laced town of Kingston, Ontario. Musk enrolled there in 1989, presumably because it was easier than immediately invading Wall Street. Also, there was the matter of his Canadian citizenship route, which, like many of Elon's future business plans, involved loopholes, contingency, maps, and the occasional, conveniently placed relative. At Queen's, Elon was not what one would call a campus celebrity. He did not join fraternities. He did not drink from red Solo cups. He did not streak across football fields with philosophical slogans scrawled across his chest. Instead, he studied endlessly, monotonously, compulsively, which, to be fair, is the point of a university, though rarely the headline. He majored in physics and economics, which sounds like the academic equivalent of choosing both broccoli and cauliflower at the buffet. Technically nutritious, emotionally beige. There, he also met Justine Wilson, who would one day become his wife, the mother of his first 5 children, and a published author of paranormal romance. The early stages of their courtship were filled with intellectual sparring, quiet library dates, and Musk showing up uninvited to deliver ice cream, which, depending on your point of view, is either charming or a breach of dessert protocol. Historians still argue whether his time at Queen's shaped his worldview or simply provided a warm-up lap for the high-speed academic highway of the United States. Whatever the case, Elon decided after 2 years to transfer to the University of Pennsylvania, or as it's known in some circles, Wharton, and that other school where people do real science. He arrived at UPenn like a USB plug looking for a port. Functional, angular, and slightly misaligned with most people's expectations. There, he split his studies between Wharton School of Business for the money and the College of Arts and Sciences for the physics, an education double feature that combined cold, capitalist calculus with the raw, chaotic energy of particle theory. At Wharton, he learned about markets, investments, and the basic mechanics of capitalism. At physics lectures, he debated entropy, energy, and the fate of the universe. It was, in hindsight, an unnervingly fitting combination for someone who would one day attempt to monetize both cars and space. Quirky tidbit. During his time at Penn, Musk and his roommate rented a 10-bedroom frat-style house, not to host wild parties, although those occurred, but to turn the property into a makeshift nightclub. They charged guests at the door and funded their rent with the proceeds. Musk, however, rarely participated in the festivities. He mostly watched the speakers, checking for audio distortions, and occasionally made quiet observations about the inefficient layout of dance floors. The money wasn't the point. The systems were. Still, he graduated with respectable grades, though not the sort that would make deans weep with pride. He had little interest in academic accolades, and even less in conventional career paths. Law school? Nope. Medicine? Too slow. A PhD in energy physics? Tempting, but not tempting enough to ignore the rapidly inflating bubble of the dot-com boom. The year was 1995. Netscape had gone public. Yahoo was shouting at the internet, and Silicon Valley smelled like a freshly printed spreadsheet. Musk decided that the world of academia could wait, preferably forever, and that entrepreneurship was calling him in a voice only he could hear, possibly through a modem handshake. Mainstream historical fact. UPenn, during the mid-1990s, was becoming a quiet incubator for future tech figures. Several alumni would go on to launch major startups, but few left such a lasting impression or trail of confused professors as Elon Musk. One must imagine his graduation, parents clapping, students cheering, and Elon, in a wrinkled gown, already thinking about coding logistics software for city newspapers. He was not motivated by tradition, nor by ceremony, nor, quite frankly, by people. He was motivated by ideas. Big, unwieldy, messy ideas. Ones that didn't quite fit into any single discipline. Ideas about electric vehicles, reusable rockets, and banking systems without banks. But before all that, before the glamour and lawsuits and awkward interviews, there was a very average student lugging a laptop the size of a microwave across campus, murmuring about bandwidth and Mars. And so, Elon Musk left college with a plan. Not a traditional one, of course. Not a work for IBM, save up for a house, buy a lawnmower kind of plan. No, this was more of a start a company in a rented office with no heat and revolutionize finance sort of plan, which, depending on your tolerance for risk, is either madness or Monday. But he wasn't alone. Kimball was waiting. California was warm. And the internet, well, the internet was about to become everyone's problem. The mid-1990s internet was a place of great mystery and even greater dial-up tones. Websites took minutes to load. Email addresses were considered futuristic, and if you wanted directions, you didn't Google anything. You unfolded a map the size of a blanket and got hopelessly lost anyway. Into this slow-loading chaos stepped Elon Musk. With a vision so quietly boring, it was almost revolutionary. What if newspapers, those proud ink-stained titans of yesterday, had a way to exist online? This was the seed of what would become Zip2, and it germinated in a San Francisco office space the size of a generous broom closet. The decor? A mattress on the floor, a second-hand computer, and walls that may or may not have been load-bearing. Legend has it, Elon literally lived at the office. His showering schedule was, at best, theoretical. Kimball Musk, his younger, more extroverted brother, joined him as co-founder. Kimball handled people. Elon handled code. And if anyone got too close to Elon while he was debugging, they were probably asked to leave, politely or not. The original concept behind Zip2 was almost aggressively uninspiring. It offered business directories and maps to local services, essentially functioning like a digital Yellow Pages with a pulse. The twist? It was targeted at newspapers, who at the time were too confused by the internet to realize it was about to eat them alive. Musk's pitch to publishers was simple. You're going extinct. Let me delay the inevitable. Some said yes. Most said, what's a URL? Still, the brothers persisted. They cold-called newsrooms, walked into offices without appointments, explained HTML to men with suspenders and clipboards. Some newspaper execs thought Elon was their IT intern. Others just told him to go away. Historians still argue whether Zip2 succeeded because of innovation or because it was the only thing vaguely resembling a tech solution that didn't involve floppy disks, possibly both. A mainstream historical fact. By 1996, the internet had about 36 million users worldwide. barely 0.9% of the global population. Musk was pitching online infrastructure to industries that still used fax machines like sacred scrolls. What made Zip2 work, eventually, was persistence. Elon worked 18 to 20-hour days, coding obsessively, barely blinking. He once reportedly slept under his desk for 3 nights straight because the commute home, which was roughly 2 blocks, took too long. A mattress in the corner served as bed, sofa, and philosophical retreat. As the company grew, so did the attention. Investors noticed. Employees were hired. Lunches became more frequent and less ramen-based. And eventually, more Davidow ventures came calling, waving checks and clipboards filled with phrases like growth strategy and organizational structure. This, naturally, meant the arrival of suits. And with suits came something Elon despised more than inefficiency: a new CEO. The board had decided that, brilliant though Musk might be, he lacked certain qualities like interpersonal tact and willingness to delegate, and the ability to avoid describing meetings as a waste of neural energy. The CEO they brought in was named Rich Sorkin. He had experience. He wore ties. He knew how to smile without terrifying people. Elon was moved sideways, reassigned to Chief Technology Officer, a title which meant he could still build things, but wasn't allowed to frighten the interns. It did not go over well. Quirky tidbit: Musk reportedly insisted that the Zip2 office use Linux servers. Despite objections, he believed in open source architecture before it was cool, or, more accurately, before it made sense to his employees. Several were baffled. One quit. Elon remained unfazed. By 1998, Zip2 was making deals. It partnered with the New York Times, Knight Ridder, and a slew of other media companies who weren't sure what they had signed but knew the internet was happening, and they didn't want to be the only ones left with just ink and tears. Then, in 1999, a true plot twist. Compaq, the computer company best known for producing beige rectangles, offered to buy Zip2 for $307 million. Elon's personal cut was $22 million. Kimball received $15 million. It was more money than either of them had ever imagined, especially considering the company had started in a one-room rental with a mattress and a dream no one understood. With his earnings, Musk did what anyone would do when blessed with absurd wealth and poor impulse control. He bought a McLaren F1, the fastest production car in the world at the time. He had it delivered to his office. He showed it off on CNN, and not long after, he crashed it. There were no seatbelts involved, no insurance, no injuries either. Miraculously, just shattered carbon fiber and a bruised ego. The story became tech folklore, a cautionary tale about speed, hubris, and the importance of not narrating your own crash while trying to impress a passenger. Historians still argue whether Musk's post-Zip2 career trajectory was shaped more by this influx of capital or by the sheer vacuum of satisfaction he felt afterward. One gets the sense that even as he counted his millions, he was already bored. Zip2 had been a stepping stone, a warm-up act, the opening band, before the real show. A little something called XCOM, but before we wire ourselves into the digital bloodstream of early online banking, let's leave Elon for a moment. standing beside the wreckage of a McLaren F1, shrugging slightly, wondering whether money could be faster too. Flush with Zip2 cash and a slightly dented McLaren, Elon Musk did what any rational 20-something with a deep disdain for inefficiency and a mild allergy to sleep would do. He decided to reinvent money. The year was 1999. America was buzzing with Y2K paranoia and startup fever. Everyone with a hoodie and an idea about disrupting something was being handed venture capital like it was Halloween candy. And into this jittery, overfunded landscape, Elon launched his next venture, a company called XCOM. Now, don't let the name fool you. It sounds like a website for questionable late-night decisions, but it was, in fact, a financial services platform, a digital bank, a place to transfer money, invest, and eventually argue about interest rates. Online, historians still argue whether the name was chosen to evoke mystery or simply because Money.com was already taken. Elon thought X sounded futuristic, sexy, mysterious. Everyone else thought it sounded vaguely unsafe to click. But as usual, Musk pushed forward, vision in hand. Patience left somewhere near a broken server in the Zip2 office. XCOM launched in late 1999 and quickly gained attention, not just for its bold name, but for its ambition to handle every part of the user's financial life, from checking to investing to payments. Basically, it wanted to be your bank, broker, and buddy, all wrapped in one. To accomplish this, Musk hired engineers, designers, economists. He spoke of eliminating banks as we knew them. He drew diagrams, gave presentations, smiled less than expected. XCOM grew fast, too fast really. In 2000, it merged with a company called Confinity, a smaller startup co-founded by a man named Peter Thiel. Confinity had created a product called PayPal, which allowed people to send payments using email. It was simple, effective, less confusing than XCOM's grand all-in-one financial utopia. The merger was intended to be harmonious, a marriage of equals, a joining of minds. What it became, instead, was a very polite knife fight. You see, while Musk envisioned a sleek, futuristic bank with glowing X's and full-service financial tools, Confinity's team just wanted to let people send money faster. This difference in philosophy soon became a difference in everything else. Quirky tidbit: Musk, a Windows enthusiast at the time, pushed to replace PayPal's Unix-based infrastructure with Microsoft servers. Engineers resisted. There were meetings. There were sighs. One engineer reportedly threatened to quit. Another just walked out mid-sentence. The system worked perfectly fine, they argued. Musk, ever the tinkerer, disagreed. Tensions rose like a poorly monitored balloon, and then came the vacation. In late 2000, Elon Musk boarded a plane for his honeymoon with Justine Wilson. He left confident that things were stable, the company was humming, and the engineers would eventually come around to his Windows migration plan. He was wrong. While Musk was somewhere over the Atlantic, wearing sunscreen and possibly trying to relax, a skill he never quite mastered, a coup unfolded back at HQ. The board, fed up with internal friction, staff complaints, and Musk's unwavering belief in his vision, at the cost of everyone else's sanity, voted to replace him as CEO. His successor, Peter Thiel. Imagine returning from your honeymoon to find that you are no longer in charge of your company, that the servers are still running Unix, that your dreams of a financial monolith named after a letter have been quietly retired. It was awkward, very awkward. Musk was relegated to the sidelines. Again. First Zip2, now this. A pattern was emerging. Mainstream, historical fact. Under Thiel, the company focused entirely on the PayPal brand and simplified its offerings. Users liked it. Investors liked it. The business stabilized. And soon, the user base exploded, particularly among eBay sellers, who used it to complete transactions more efficiently than bouncing checks or awkwardly mailed envelopes of cash. Despite the tension, Elon stayed on as the company's largest shareholder. He grumbled, he commented, he watched, but he did not leave. He was biding his time, possibly recalibrating, definitely plotting. In 2002, eBay bought PayPal for $1.5 billion in stock. Musk's personal take, about $180 million, enough to buy another McLaren, crash it again, and still have change for a warehouse full of espresso. Historians still argue whether being ousted twice shaped Elon's later preference for maintaining total control over his companies. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, all entities where he ensured that no board could take the wheel while he was off somewhere contemplating Martian fuel dynamics. The PayPal era, while relatively brief, was pivotal. It taught Elon that tech alone wasn't enough, that branding mattered, that control was fragile, and that the future was built not just on code, but on stubbornness, timing, and a mild willingness to lose friends. And so, Elon Musk walked away from his second startup exit, newly rich, vaguely resentful, and more ambitious than ever. He had the money. He had the vision. He had the vendetta. And next? Well, next, he'd try to go to space, because of course he would, with approximately $180 million now parked safely in his bank account and an ever-growing itch to do something dramatically unreasonable. Elon Musk entered his next phase. Space. Yes, actual space. Not metaphorical space. Not mental space. Outer space. It was 2002. Most people, after pocketing a small fortune from a billion-dollar company sale, would consider a long vacation, perhaps a quiet cabin, a yacht, a life of low-stakes investing, medium-stakes tennis, and high-stakes wine. But Elon Musk was not most people. He was barely even some people. He was Elon Musk, and Elon Musk wanted rockets. The story of SpaceX begins, predictably, with a PowerPoint presentation. You see, Musk had become increasingly concerned with humanity's long-term survival. Specifically, the idea that if Earth were to suffer a catastrophic event, asteroid, war, unsupervised AI, we would have no backup plan, no escape route, no second planet to ruin more slowly. This concerned him deeply. Some would say obsessively, most would say loudly. So, he founded Space Exploration Technologies, Corp, or SpaceX for short. The goal? To reduce the cost of space, travel by a factor of 10, and eventually establish a self-sustaining colony on Mars. No big deal. Quirky tidbit: Musk originally explored buying a Russian rocket. He flew to Moscow with a small team to negotiate. They were shown cold hospitality, colder conference rooms, and rockets priced like small nations. Musk tried to haggle. The Russians laughed. Allegedly, one even spat. Musk flew home, opened up a spreadsheet, and declared, "We'll build our own." And that's what they did. Historians still argue whether this trip to Russia was a serious procurement attempt or simply a very expensive exercise in stubbornness. Either way, it resulted in Musk sitting down with aerospace textbooks, calculator in hand, muttering things like fuel mass ratios and oxidizer flow. He assembled a team of engineers, some from NASA, some from the private sector, some who just liked the idea of building things that could explode dramatically, but on purpose. They set up shop in a nondescript warehouse in El Segundo, California, not far from LAX, because nothing says revolutionary space flight like frequent noise complaints from Delta pilots. This was the PowerPoint era of SpaceX. Lots of slides, lots of renderings, very few actual rockets. But the dream was fully formed. Reusable rockets, cheap launches, Mars bases with domes, a future where humanity became a multi-planetary species, probably while listening to Synthwave. Elon worked as a CEO and chief engineer, which, if we're being honest, is like being both the captain of the ship and the guy patching the holes in the hull. He slept at the office, again, ate questionable food, again, and surrounded himself with people who didn't flinch when he said things like heat shield failure or we need to bring this price point down by 90%. Mainstream historical fact. At the time, the idea of a private company building orbital-class rockets was considered ridiculous. NASA, Boeing, and Lockheed dominated the landscape. SpaceX, by comparison, was a startup with barely functioning plumbing and a logo that looked suspiciously like a rejected sci-fi film title. Still, in 2006, SpaceX unveiled its first rocket, the Falcon 1, named in honor of the Millennium Falcon. Naturally, the Falcon 1 was small, modest, and deeply experimental. It had about as much swagger as a folding chair, but it was theirs. And so came the first launch, and the second, and the third, all failures. The first launch, an engine caught fire. The second, it spun out of control. The third, it almost made it, and then didn't. Each failure cost millions. Each was followed by a press release, a tight-lipped debrief, and Musk announcing that he still believed. Quirky tidbit. After one failed launch, Musk allegedly emailed his entire team with a message that simply read, "This is not the end." The punctuation may or may not have included an ellipsis. Morale hovered somewhere between inspired and sleep-deprived panic. The world, meanwhile, remained skeptical. The media chuckled politely. Competitors dismissed them. NASA mostly ignored them. And yet, Elon pressed on. By now, he had sunk over 100 million of his personal fortune into SpaceX. Most of it gone. Most of it into fireballs. Some into hardware. A bit into questionable catering. And yet, he never wavered. Historians still argue whether this was bold vision or simply an expensive form of denial. But even at this early stage, The culture of SpaceX had formed, fast-paced, brutal, obsessed with results. Engineers worked 90-hour weeks. Deadlines were measured in burns and bruises. Mistakes were tolerated once, and sleep was treated with suspicion. Musk would walk the factory floor, pointing out flaws. He'd ask junior engineers to justify their designs. He'd fire people mid-meeting. One employee compared the experience to working in a pressure cooker strapped to a rocket engine, which, to be fair, was a fairly accurate description. And so, with 3 failed launches and dwindling funds, Musk prepared for one more try. One last attempt to prove the impossible was at least flammably plausible. But that's for the next section. For now, picture it. A long warehouse, dim fluorescent lights, engineers slumped over terminals, a whiteboard full of equations, half erased, and in the corner, Elon Musk, tired, underfed, possibly wearing the same shirt from 2 days ago, whispering to himself, one more launch, just one, 3 launches, 3 failures, a bank account that now resembled a slowly draining kiddie pool, and Elon Musk, pacing the length of a dimly lit warehouse, wondering whether this whole private spaceflight thing had been a romantic notion brought on by too many Isaac Asimov novels and not enough sleep. Welcome to the chapter of the story we'll call, without irony, Failure to Launch. By 2008, SpaceX had become a cautionary tale in the aerospace community. Industry veterans, including some from NASA, looked on with a mix of schadenfreude and condescension. After all, building a rocket that could actually reach orbit was something only governments and aerospace megacorporations could manage, or so they believed. And yet, there was Falcon 1, a rocket no taller than a modest office building, standing proudly on a launch pad in Kwajalein Atoll, a remote speck of sand in the Pacific. It was a site chosen for its isolation, perfect for explosions that didn't require a cleanup crew with badges. Let's rewind for a moment. The first Falcon 1 launch in 2006 ended after 25 seconds. A fuel leak caused a fire. Engineers learned something. Mainly, don't let fuel leak. The second launch, in 2007, made it slightly farther, around 300 kilometers, before spiraling out of control due to a stage separation error. Space, it turned out, did not appreciate arrogance. The third launch, in 2008, was supposed to be the breakthrough. But alas, the first stage and second stage, like 2 co-workers who can't stand each other, refused to separate cleanly. The rocket veered off course and was summarily swallowed by Earth's disinterested gravity. At this point, even Musk's inner circle began to twitch. Quirky tidbit. After the third failure, Musk admitted that if the fourth launch failed, SpaceX would be out of money. Not lean quarter out of money. Pack up the wires and call your parents. Out of money. Historians still argue whether he was truly on the brink of collapse or simply posturing for dramatic effect. Knowing Musk, the answer might be yes to both. Morale at SpaceX plummeted. Engineers cried. Vendors got nervous. And Elon doubled down. He pushed harder, slept even less, reminded everyone constantly that this had to work. Not because of pride, not because of ego, but because, as he said in more than one teary-eyed press conference, the future of humanity depends on it. Let's be clear, there were no customers lined up, no satellite orders flooding in, just a small team, a dream, and a fourth rocket that absolutely could not fail. They called it Flight 4. The launch was set for September 28th, 2008. The rocket stood on Amalek Island like an underdog gladiator, patched, reprogrammed, whispered to by tired engineers with sunburns and caffeine dependencies. The mood was tense, the air humid, the hopes ridiculously high. This time, everything had to go right. Mainstream historical fact. This was the first time a privately funded, liquid-fueled rocket would reach Earth orbit. No government backstop, no billion-dollar safety net. Just math, metal, and a lot of people hoping their email inbox wouldn't suddenly contain the words "final paycheck." The countdown began. The engines ignited. Falcon 1 rose, slowly, wobbly at first, then with confidence, into the blue. And it didn't explode. It didn't tumble. It didn't suffer from stage separation, hiccups. It kept going, past 100 kilometers, past the Kármán line, into low Earth orbit. Cheers erupted in the SpaceX control room. People cried. People screamed. One engineer fainted. Elon Musk simply sat down, buried his face in his hands, and wept. Not with joy, exactly, but with relief, with exhaustion, with a vindication so overwhelming that even he, the high-functioning sleep deprivation engine, needed a minute to reboot. Quirky detail. The rocket's payload wasn't a customer satellite. It was a dummy payload with the names of SpaceX employees engraved on a plaque, because no one else had trusted them yet. But they trusted each other. This launch changed everything, not just for SpaceX, but for the entire aerospace industry. It proved that private companies could build and launch rockets, not just fancy firecrackers, but orbital-class launch vehicles. Soon after, NASA called. They had been watching, quietly, cautiously, possibly with popcorn. And now, after Falcon 1's success, they offered a $1.6 billion contract for resupply missions to the International Space Station. Suddenly, SpaceX wasn't a joke. It was a partner, an official space company, a threat to Boeing and Lockheed, a source of national pride, or at least curiosity. Historians still argue whether this moment marked a turning point in space exploration or merely a flashy footnote. What's undeniable is this. From that point forward, space was no longer exclusively government territory. Elon Musk had punched a hole in the sky and slipped a business card through it. And so, with the company saved, contracts signed, and a modest burst of legitimacy finally earned, Elon turned to his next challenge: electric cars. Because after you conquer gravity, the next logical step is traffic. By now, Elon Musk had become something of a professional problem collector. Space, solved-ish. Finance, digitized and abandoned. Sleep, still not a priority. And so, naturally, he turned his attention to the automotive industry, that soot-covered bastion of combustion engines, tailpipe emissions, and automotive commercials featuring trucks driving through waterfalls for some reason. Enter Tesla Motors. electric cars, but make them cool. Now, Elon did not actually found Tesla. That honor goes to Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, a pair of engineers with a shared hatred of gas stations and a love of lithium-ion batteries. They started the company in 2003, envisioning an electric sports car that would make the Prius look like a beige potato. Musk joined soon after as the lead investor, throwing down $6.5 million of his freshly minted PayPal loot. He became chairman of the board, which is a polite way of saying the guy with all the money and all the opinions. And he had a lot of opinions. At first, his role was relatively hands-off. He offered guidance, money, comments on design documents at 2 a.m., but gradually, inevitably, he became more involved because Elon Musk doesn't stay in his lane. He builds the lane, argues with it, and then asks why it's not headed to Mars. Historians still argue whether his increasing control over Tesla was a strategic necessity or simply his natural gravitational pull toward the center of every solar system he enters. Whatever the case, by 2007, tensions were building between Musk and Tesla's original founders, and not the fun, productive kind of tension, the lawsuit kind. But let's back up to the part where they actually tried to build a car. The first vehicle was the Tesla Roadster, an electric sports car based on the Lotus Elise chassis. It was small, sleek, expensive, and, if it worked, proof that electric cars didn't have to look like depressed refrigerators. It could go 0 to 60 mph in under 4 seconds, which is coincidentally about the amount of time it took Elon to correct someone's grammar on a conference call. Quirky tidbit: the Roadster's original prototype had a range of only 90 miles, and it once burst into flames during a test. An engineer reportedly extinguished it with a Red Bull, which was either poetic or very concerning. Production was challenging. Batteries overheated. Costs ballooned. Deadlines were missed so consistently they might as well have been aspirational slogans. Each Roadster ended up costing over $100,000, which is roughly the price of a small moon made of cheese. And yet, the media loved it. TechCrunch, Wired, and other Silicon Valley adjacent outlets praised the car as revolutionary. Finally, a car for the kind of person who wore hoodies to board meetings but still wanted to out-accelerate a Porsche. Mainstream historical fact: the first production Roadster was delivered in 2008. It had a range of about 244 miles, impressive for the time, and it was utterly silent, unless you count the smug hum of environmental superiority. But behind the scenes, Tesla was a mess. Suppliers were late, batteries were volatile, the company was hemorrhaging money, and the original founders began to drift or were pushed out. Musk stepped in as CEO in 2008, a title he has held with a Vulcan death grip ever since. With that, the public narrative shifted. No longer was Tesla a small electric car startup. Now it was Elon Musk's electric car company, as if the cars were powered not by batteries, but by ambition and unrelenting intensity. Under Musk's rule, the company tightened operations, costs were trimmed, people were fired, deadlines remained stressful, but now they came with ominous email reminders. And slowly, painfully, Tesla delivered its first 2,500 roadsters, each a handcrafted exercise in optimism, engineering, and financial masochism. Quirky detail. Each roadster came with a charging cable the size of a garden hose, and early buyers were essentially beta testers who happened to also be millionaires. The car could only be serviced at select locations, most of which were inconveniently located, unless you happened to live inside Elon Musk's glove compartment. But Tesla had made its point. Electric cars could be fast, beautiful, desirable, and also terrifying to manufacture. Musk's vision went beyond sports cars. He wanted a mass-market electric vehicle, one that normal humans could afford, one that could scale, one that didn't require a second mortgage or a trust fund. But first, they needed more money and faith and a global recession to spice things up. Because in late 2008, while Tesla was limping through roadster deliveries and SpaceX was burning through rockets like matchsticks, the financial world collapsed. Banks froze. Investors panicked. Money became harder to find than an emotionally stable tech founder. Both Tesla and SpaceX were weeks away from bankruptcy. Musk, stretched thinner than a conference call Wi-Fi signal, was literally deciding which company to save. At one point, he borrowed money from friends to pay rent. The McLaren had long since been wrecked. His marriage was unraveling. His inbox was 93% panic and 7% legal threats. Historians still argue whether this was Musk's lowest point or merely his most cinematic. Either way, it set the stage for an absurd comeback. SpaceX would survive, barely, thanks to the NASA contract and the fourth Falcon 1 launch. Tesla would survive, thanks to a last-minute funding round and a small but crucial investment from Daimler, the parent company of Mercedes-Benz. 2 companies, 2 near deaths, and one extremely tired man, still convinced he hadn't done enough. Next, well, a luxury sedan, some more lawsuits, and inevitably, Twitter. The Tesla Roadster had, against considerable odds and the occasional small fire, entered the world. It wasn't a bestseller. It was barely a seller at all. But it existed. That was enough to keep the dream alive, if only on life support and Red Bull fumes. So, with the sports car out the door and a few thousand early adopters cruising silently around California like smug electric phantoms, Elon Musk turned to the next logical step: a real car, a sedan, a mass-market vehicle. Something that could be driven to a PTA meeting without requiring an engineering degree and a fire extinguisher. Thus began the long and excruciatingly complicated development of the Tesla Model S. But before we get there, let's linger a moment on the Roadster's lingering problems. Because, yes, while the Roadster was fast, beautiful, and capable of destroying most gas-powered sports cars at a green light, it was also finicky. The battery could degrade if left unplugged too long, like a phone that quietly punished you for taking a vacation. The electronics sometimes acted like moody teenagers, and the build quality was, shall we say, aspirational. Historians still argue whether these early issues were standard startup growing pains or signs of deeper dysfunction. Owners were forgiving, some because they believed in the mission, others because they had stock options. There were recalls. There were firmware updates that bricked vehicles. One early update famously disabled a roadster's ability to reverse for 2 weeks. Musk called it unfortunate. Owners used phrases we won't repeat here. Still, the Roadster had accomplished its purpose. It proved that electric cars didn't have to be awful, and Tesla barely, painfully, survived its awkward birth. Now, on to the Model S, where the Roadster had been built on the borrowed bones of a Lotus. The Model S would be Tesla's first car designed from scratch. It would be fully electric. It would have 4 doors. It would seat 7. If 2 of them were child-sized and willing to sit in the trunk, it would be, Musk insisted, the best car in the world. Because why aim for profitability when you can aim for immortality? Development began in 2008, but serious momentum didn't pick up until 2009 when Tesla unveiled a prototype. It was sleek. It was silver. It looked like a Jaguar had politely asked a spaceship to dinner. Reviewers were intrigued. Investors blinked, and Elon grinned with the kind of restrained satisfaction usually reserved for Bond villains. Quirky tidbit. Musk personally obsessed over the door handles, insisting they retract flush with the car body. Engineers protested. No one cares, they said. It's inefficient, they said. Elon said, make them disappear. The handles were eventually programmed to emerge like mechanical gophers. The future had arrived, and it was really into unnecessary flourishes. Funding remained a problem. The global financial crisis had sucked the air out of the market, and Tesla, despite its beautiful concept car, was still seen as a moonshot with wheels. So Musk did what any rational person would do. He took Tesla public. In 2010, Tesla became the first American car company to IPO since Ford in 1956. The timing was bold, the stock price modest, and the public reaction somewhere between curious and are they still making cars? The IPO raised $226 million, which bought some time and a bit of credibility. That same year, Tesla received a $465 million loan from the U.S. Department of Energy, part of a broader green energy initiative. Musk, always eager to thank his benefactors, later paid it off 9 years early, mostly so he could tweet about it. Mainstream historical fact. The first Model S deliveries began in 2012. Reviewers were stunned. The car was quiet, powerful, elegant, and packed with tech. Most notably, a giant 17-inch touchscreen in the center console, which looked like someone had duct-taped an iPad to the dashboard. Drivers could adjust suspension, control climate, browse the web, and eventually watch cat videos, all without taking their eyes off the road for more than 7 dangerously long seconds. The press swooned. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year. Consumer Reports gave it 99 out of 100. Musk, never one to downplay validation, used the acclaim to declare that Tesla would lead the future of transportation. But behind the glossy praise were more problems. Production was a nightmare. Tesla built its own factory, the Fremont plant in California, on top of a former NUMMI site. Robots were installed. People were trained. Timelines were stretched into the shape of pretzels. Quirky tidbit. In the early days, cars were sometimes delivered without functioning door seals or with missing trim. One customer reportedly received a Model S with 2 left rear seats. Tesla offered him an apology and a software update. Despite the hiccups, the Model S became a quiet sensation. Sales rose, the stock rose, and, perhaps most surprisingly, the car worked. It didn't catch fire much. It didn't break down often, and it offered a range of over 250 miles, which turned range anxiety into merely range mild concern. More models were promised: a compact sedan, an SUV, even a truck, but these would come later. For now, Elon Musk had a space company with a NASA contract, a car company with rave reviews, and a public profile that was quickly transitioning from quirky billionaire to messianic tech overlord. Next, solar panels, family entanglements, and the creeping sense that sleep might have been the better investment all along. While Elon Musk was busy reinventing transportation and occasionally tweeting like a Bond villain on decaf, there was another energy bubbling just beneath the surface: solar power. Because when your resume already includes revolutionizing money, cars, and rockets, the next logical move is to tackle the sun. Enter Solar City, founded in 2006 by Lyndon and Peter Reeve, Elon's cousins, who had apparently caught whatever hereditary virus compels the Musk family to stare at infrastructure and whisper, "I could fix that." Though he wasn't the CEO, Elon was the chairman of the board and the original idea man. According to lore, and probably several PowerPoint slides, the concept was born during a family trip. Musk proposed that someone needed to make solar energy mainstream, and who better than his own DNA? Historians still argue whether this family-founded company was a brilliant strategic extension of Musk's clean energy vision, or simply Thanksgiving nepotism with a corporate filing number. Either way, Solar City launched with the goal of installing solar panels on rooftops across America, ideally before the glaciers melted. Their pitch was simple: let us install panels. You pay less for electricity. You help the planet. Also, look at this graph. It worked. Kind of. In the late 2000s, solar was having a moment. Government subsidies abounded. Environmental guilt was marketable, and Solar City rode the wave with aggressive sales tactics and a business model that favored leasing panels rather than outright purchases. This made it affordable for homeowners and mathematically confusing for everyone else. Meanwhile, Musk juggled his now familiar roles: behind-the-scenes puppeteer, public face, and occasional guy who shows up at a solar panel demo with a leather jacket and a grin that says, "I could also build this into a rocket." Quirky tidbit: in 2012, Solar City installed solar panels on the White House roof. No one was allowed to tweet about it, possibly because sunlight is notoriously apolitical, or maybe just because the Obama administration preferred its energy policy without flamethrowers attached. The company expanded rapidly. Installations climbed. Revenues grew. But so did the questions. Critics pointed out that Solar City's business model was cash-intensive, its margins razor-thin, and its long-term profitability uncertain. Much like Tesla in its early days, it seemed powered more by belief than balance sheets. Mainstream historical fact. By 2015, Solar City had become the largest residential solar installer in the U.S. Its stock, however, began to slide. Losses piled, Up, the market got crowded. Analysts began using the word unsustainable, which for a renewable energy company is just rude. And then, in 2016, came the twist no one was expecting, except, of course, Elon Musk. Tesla announced it would acquire Solar City in a deal worth $2.6 billion. The stated goal? To integrate solar energy, storage, and electric vehicles into one elegant Muskian ecosystem. Picture it. The sun powers your home through a Tesla solar roof, stores excess energy in a Tesla Powerwall, and then charges your Tesla car, all without involving a single oil company or carbon molecule with a smug attitude. It was a bold vision. It was also, legally speaking, a mess, because Elon was both Tesla's CEO and Solar City's largest shareholder. The deal was immediately labeled a conflict of interest. Shareholders grumbled, critics howled, lawsuits emerged. One suit claimed Musk had bailed out Solar City for personal gain, turning Tesla into a solar company against its will. Historians still argue whether the acquisition was strategic genius or a spectacularly expensive family favor wrapped in eco-friendly packaging. Quirky tidbit: Musk unveiled the Tesla solar roof just before the shareholder vote on the merger. The product looked beautiful, revolutionary. It also didn't exist yet. The tiles on display were reportedly non-functional prototypes, a Hollywood facade, a very shiny maybe. Still, the vote passed. The merger happened. Tesla absorbed Solar City, rebranding it as Tesla Energy. And Elon, despite the lawsuits and the PR backlash, declared the move a no-brainer. Years later, court rulings would side with Musk. No fraud, no conspiracy, just a wildly ambitious man, making wildly ambitious bets with staggering amounts of other people's money. Meanwhile, Solar City's legacy remained mixed. On the one hand, thousands of solar installations, a legitimate contribution to renewable energy, advancements in battery storage tech. On the other hand, unmet promises, product delays, and employees quietly muttering about power walls that only sort of worked. As Tesla Energy limped forward, Musk remained undeterred. He spoke of energy independence, zero emissions, and a planet saved not through policy, but through products, all designed in-house, manufactured at breakneck speed, and preferably charged overnight. But behind every Tesla Powerwall was a lingering truth. Solar City had been a gamble. Not all of it paid off. Not all of it needed to. Because for Elon Musk, the destination always mattered more than the route. And next on his map, a high-speed vacuum tube, a concept paper with too many acronyms, and the world's most over-engineered alternative to a bus. By 2012, Elon Musk was no longer just a startup founder with an unusually large collection of half-finished prototypes and court documents. He was now a CEO of multiple companies, a media darling, and a man who had successfully put a luxury electric car on the road without setting too many things on fire. Relatively speaking, the Tesla Model S had officially launched, and to the surprise of many, including perhaps Elon himself, it was actually good. It wasn't just good for an electric car, it was good by any standard. Smooth, quiet, beautiful, able to embarrass a BMW M5 at a red light without breaking a sweat or emitting a single molecule of regret. Reviewers lined up to heap praise on the Model S. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year. Consumer Reports gave it 99 out of 100, later calling it the best car they'd ever tested. Elon Musk, clearly allergic to subtlety, declared it proof that Tesla could not only compete with traditional automakers, but obliterate them while standing on a carbon-neutral pedestal and sipping organic battery juice. But success, as always, came with footnotes. The early Model S was indeed a marvel of engineering, but it was also plagued by the usual Tesla cocktail: delays, defects, and dramatic customer service emails. Some owners reported issues with misaligned body panels, sticky door handles, and infotainment systems that randomly rebooted as if the car were meditating. One Model S owner described it as the most beautiful headache I've ever had. Historians still argue whether these problems were teething pains or signs of a company scaling too quickly, too confidently, and too sleep-deprived. Meanwhile, Elon Musk pressed forward. Production ramped up. The Fremont factory groaned under the weight of demand, robots, and inspirational posters featuring vaguely threatening quotes about excellence. Tesla had become a lifestyle brand, a stock market darling, and for some, a religion with wheels. Quirky tidbit: the Model S had a secret, ludicrous mode, an acceleration setting that allowed the car to go from 0 to 60 mph in 2.5 seconds, faster than most Ferraris. Elon named it after a joke from Spaceballs. Investors were delighted. Safety regulators were less amused. Sales climbed. Tesla stock soared. Short sellers multiplied. And Musk, naturally, leaned into the spotlight. He hosted product announcements like a tech messiah, casually referencing rocket science, while unveiling software updates that added fart noises to the car's speakers, because nothing says we're disrupting Detroit like programming flatulence into your fleet. But Musk's ambitions went far beyond electric sedans. He spoke frequently, too frequently, some would say, about his grand plan. A master plan, in fact, which he published online like a digital scroll of destiny. Step 1. Build a low-volume, high-price sports car, the Roadster. Step 2. Use that money to build a medium-volume, medium-price sedan, Model S. Step 3. Use that money to build an affordable, high-volume car. Step 4. Profit. Step 5. Colonize Mars. Unofficial addendum. At this point in the saga, Tesla had nailed steps 1 and 2, and now it was time for step 3, Model 3. But before that, Musk needed something to maintain momentum, something that would keep shareholders excited, something tubular. Enter the Hyperloop. Mainstream historical fact. In 2013, Elon Musk released a 58-page white paper describing a new mode of transportation. The concept? A sealed tube, low air, pressure, inside which passenger pods would travel at 760 meters mirabile using magnetic levitation. Think vacuum trains. Think bank teller tubes. But make it tech. The Hyperloop promised to shuttle passengers from Los Angeles to San Francisco in 35 minutes, or approximately the time it takes a Tesla to update its firmware and reboot 3 times. It was futuristic, slick, fast, and, importantly, not actually real. Musk had no intention of building it himself. He simply released the concept into the world like a science fair project on performance enhancers, declaring that someone else could bring it to life if they had the nerve, the money, and a warehouse full of air compressors. Critics called it unrealistic, dangerous vaporware. Fans called it visionary. Engineers called it a physics headache wrapped in hype. Quirky detail. One of the Hyperloop illustrations Musk released showed a giant glass capsule zipping along a track above Interstate 5, which experts later noted would have melted anyone inside due to unaddressed thermal issues. Minor oversight. Still, universities, startups, and eccentric billionaires jumped on the idea. Competitions were held. Scale models were built. Elon approved from afar, like a benevolent, if easily distracted, emperor. Meanwhile, back at Tesla, work on the Model X, an SUV with falcon wing doors that required NASA-level hinge calculations, was underway, and the Model 3 was quietly being sculpted in the background, all while Musk continued to juggle SpaceX launches, Tesla production hell, Solar City integration, and occasional tweets that moved entire markets. Historians still argue whether the Hyperloop was a genuine contribution to transit innovation or a strategic distraction deployed to pull attention away from Tesla's mounting growing pains. But it didn't matter, because Elon had successfully turned his name into a brand, a spectacle, a force. You didn't buy a Tesla because it was a car. You bought it because it was a statement. And as Elon looked ahead to trucks, tunnels, and neurotech, he began to realize something else. People would follow him, even if he didn't always know exactly where he was going. By now, Elon Musk had grown into the role he was seemingly destined for, tech prophet with a Wi-Fi connection. He had launched cars into orbit. He had sold solar panels to people who couldn't spell photovoltaic. He had invented a button that made your electric sedan pretend to be a whoopee cushion. And yet, somehow, he still had more ideas. Let us now turn our attention to one of the most conceptually ambitious and logistically questionable ideas in the Muskiverse, the Hyperloop. Now, to be clear, Elon Musk did not invent the idea of vacuum tube transportation. Engineers and sci-fi writers had been sketching out pressurized people pipes since at least the 1800s, when some optimistic Victorian probably thought trains needed more suction and less soot. But Elon, as always, brought something else to the table: PowerPoint slides, a white paper, and the phrase alpha design, which sounds fancy, but mostly means don't try this at home. In August 2013, Musk unveiled his Hyperloop Alpha concept, a high-speed transportation system wherein pods would hurtle through low-pressure tubes at speeds up to 760 miles per hour. That's faster than a commercial jet, faster than a speeding bullet, and just slightly faster than Elon's Twitter fingers during an earnings call. The route proposed: Los Angeles to San Francisco in 35 minutes. That's roughly how long it takes to find parking in either city, give or take a few existential crises. The core mechanics were simple in the way nuclear fusion is simple. low air pressure tubes, magnetic levitation, linear induction motors, pods with air skis, a dash of hope, and a gallon of lawsuits. Musk didn't want to build it himself. He had Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City, a growing horde of lawsuits, and whatever that neural thing was, beginning to whisper at him in the dark. Instead, he open-sourced the concept, inviting others to take on the challenge of making it work, or at least funding the attempt. Historians still argue whether this was a stroke of collaborative brilliance or just Musk offloading a moonshot into the wild because he didn't want to deal with the plumbing. Quirky tidbit: the original proposal suggested that the Hyperloop would cost $6 billion, which caused every transportation expert in America to simultaneously sprain their eyebrows. For reference, California's high-speed rail, which still isn't done, was already on track to cost over $80 billion, and it used wheels. Elon's proposal had no wheels. Public reaction was divided. Fans called it the future of transportation. Skeptics called it a distraction. Engineers called it not technically impossible, which in engineering terms is a polite way of saying, we'll see after 17 lawsuits and 100 environmental impact studies. Still, the idea gained traction. Startups popped up with names like Hyperloop Transportation Technologies and Virgin Hyperloop One, none of which had Musk in the name, but all of which carried his unmistakable DNA: optimism, velocity, and deeply impractical launch schedules. To support the buzz, SpaceX hosted annual Hyperloop pod competitions, inviting college teams to build prototype pods and race them inside a short vacuum test track. The winners were usually the teams who could go fast without exploding, a rare but highly respected skill. Mainstream historical fact: in 2017, the winning pod reached a speed of 284 miles per hour inside SpaceX's test tube. This was celebrated despite the fact that the tube was only about 1 kilometer long, meaning the ride lasted approximately 5 seconds, or just enough time to say, "Was that it?" Meanwhile, Elon Musk, despite not officially building a Hyperloop, dug a hole, literally, through a new venture called the Boring Company. Yes, really. Musk began tunneling beneath Los Angeles. The stated goal was to ease traffic congestion with underground transportation systems. The unstated goal may have involved tax breaks, flamethrower sales, and a personal need to build a lair. Quirky detail: when asked why he named it the Boring Company, Musk replied, "Because it's what we do. We bore tunnels. Also, it's funny. The logo, printed on hats and flamethrowers, sold out within hours. The tunnels themselves took longer. Initial plans for urban Hyperloop-style transport quickly gave way to loop systems, which were just Teslas in tunnels. Critics pointed out that this was essentially a fancy electric subway with worse throughput. Supporters countered that it had LED lights and that the cars were quiet. Still, the vision persisted. In Las Vegas, the Boring Company completed its first operational loop beneath the convention center. It was mostly used to transport people short distances while they stared out the window and pretended not to notice that the car was driving itself slowly through a tube. Historians still argue whether the Hyperloop will ever truly materialize, or if it will remain a symbol of Muskian ambition. Bold, headline grabbing and slightly allergic to delivery dates. But for Elon Musk, that didn't matter. He had already moved on to other challenges, other tunnels, other neural interfaces and monkey experiments. Because why stop at fixing transportation when you can start plugging computers into brains? By the time Elon Musk began discussing colonizing Mars in earnest, most people had stopped asking whether he was serious. They had seen enough. Rockets launched, sedans accelerated, tunnels bored, and PowerPoints hyperlooped to know that when Musk said something insane, it usually meant a prototype was already being welded together somewhere in a warehouse with flickering lights and very little fire safety documentation. So when he stood on a stage in 2016 and unveiled his plan to send 1 million people to Mars, no one laughed. They blinked. They whispered. They opened Twitter. But they did not laugh. This was the Interplanetary Transport System, later renamed BFR. Then, more grandiosely, and perhaps more ambiguously, Starship. Historians still argue whether the shifting names were due to strategic rebranding or the realization that calling your flagship vehicle Big Fucking Rocket might pose difficulties during children's science fairs. The plan was monumental. A fully reusable rocket system capable of carrying 100 plus people at a time, powered by methane-based Raptor engines, with the final destination, the Red Planet, and Elon, ever the meticulous presenter, showed animations of future Martian cities, glass domes, solar panels, people farming potatoes in vacuum-safe jumpsuits, all rendered in glossy CGI that suggested deep belief, or, at the very least, a deeply enthusiastic graphic design team. Quirky tidbit. When asked why Mars, Musk replied, "Because it's cool." He later expanded on this with slightly more nuance. We want to become a multi-planetary species. If something were to happen on Earth, asteroid impact, supervolcano, rogue AI, we need a plan B. Note, that list did not include a global shortage of Teslas, but one assumes that would be added in the deluxe edition. At this point, SpaceX was already riding high. The Falcon 9 had become a workhorse for satellite launches. The Dragon capsule had successfully resupplied the International Space Station, and in 2020, SpaceX achieved what had previously required flags, anthems, and decades of bureaucracy. It launched humans into orbit from American soil under a private banner. Mainstream historical fact. NASA's Commercial Crew Program partnered with SpaceX to send astronauts aboard the Crew Dragon to the ISS. It was the first time a private company had ever done such a thing. Musk cried. Twitter exploded. Boeing took notes. But back to Mars. Sort of. Because while the Starship project was nominally about interplanetary transport, it began, like all great ventures, with a lot of steel and even more explosions. Initial high Starship prototypes, lovingly named things like Starhopper, were little more than silver grain silos with engines. They launched from Boca Chica, Texas, a site that resembled a cross between a spaceport and a Mad Max film set, complete with wind-blasted equipment, tents, and at least one suspiciously parked food truck. The first test flights were dramatic. One flew a few feet, hovered like a curious hummingbird, then landed with all the elegance of a one-legged fridge. Another reached altitude, flipped, and exploded upon landing, a maneuver Elon dubbed, with trademark understatement, rapid unscheduled disassembly. Each time a prototype blew up, Twitter would gasp, the media would tut, and Musk would tweet something like, progress, followed by a meme, quirky detail. The early starships were made of a stainless steel, not aluminum or carbon composites. Musk believed it was cheaper, more durable, and also just looked cool, which, in the hierarchy of rocket design priorities, sits somewhere between aerodynamics and Instagram potential. Despite setbacks and molten debris, progress was steady, engines improved. Flights grew higher, landings grew slightly less catastrophic, and eventually, a full-scale starship successfully landed without exploding on the second attempt, which, in SpaceX time, is practically perfect. But the Mars talk, that remained aspirational. SpaceX began pitching Starship as a multi-purpose vehicle for cargo, for humans, for the moon, for Elon's increasingly poetic dreams about leaving Earth behind. NASA took interest. In 2021, it selected Starship as the vehicle for the Artemis lunar lander, part of the plan to return humans to the moon. This was a big deal, a government contract, real money, prestige, and something to do while Mars remained aspirational. Historians still argue whether Mars is truly achievable within Musk's lifetime. Some say yes, by the late 2030s. Others say no, because cosmic radiation, logistics, and humans are terrible at long-distance group projects. But for Musk, Mars remains a symbol of ambition, of survival, of standing in a desert, pointing at the sky and shouting, "Build that." And yet, there's an irony to it all, because while Elon plotted Martian colonies, designed spacecraft, and gave stirring monologues about planetary stewardship, back on Earth, he was also spending more and more time on Twitter, where dreams go to die, or at least get ratioed. It started innocently enough, a few tweets here and there, updates about rocket launches, photos of Teslas at sunset, a snarky reply to a critic, a meme involving velociraptors, the occasional reminder that yes, you can absolutely run multiple billion-dollar companies and still have time to argue with someone named a Crypto Lord 69. Thus began the Twitter years. Elon Musk's relationship with Twitter, later known, perhaps cruelly, as X, is something historians, sociologists, and exhausted public relations professionals will spend years trying to understand. Was it performance art, a cry for help, or simply the logical extension of what happens when a tech CEO realizes he can broadcast thoughts directly into 120 million brains without any editorial delay? Historians still argue whether Musk's embrace of Twitter was driven by genius-level brand strategy or a compulsive need to poke digital hornet nests while sipping lukewarm coffee. But what's certain is this: Twitter became Elon's stage, and every post, like, and poll was part of the show. Let's rewind. By 2018, Musk's tweeting had already crossed into infamy. There was the now legendary tweet, "Am considering taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured." The number? A marijuana reference. The funding? Not actually secured. The consequences? A swift response from the SEC, which fined him $20 million and forced him to step down as Tesla's chairman, though notably not CEO. Quirky tidbit. Musk later said he picked the number because he thought his girlfriend would find it funny. Wall Street did not laugh. Stockholders wept, the internet cheered, and Elon kept tweeting. There were polls, announcements, denials, announcements about the denials, tweets deleted, tweets reposted, tweets that moved entire stock prices and wiped out billions in shareholder value, all in under 280 characters. Mainstream historical fact: no other CEO in history has so regularly triggered investigations, market volatility, and memes from a single social media account, not even the ones with fake mustaches and offshore banking apps. In between serious corporate news, Musk would post images of Shiba Inus, anime girls, and diagrams of Mars colonies drawn in crayon. He tweeted about flamethrowers, cybertrucks, and once used the platform to call a British cave rescuer a pedo guy, in what may be the most unnecessary escalation in modern PR history. That lawsuit didn't stick, but the headlines did, as his follower count grew into the tens of millions. Twitter became not just a platform, but a weapon. Elon could mock competitors, squash rumors, announce products, and troll regulators, all before breakfast. Quirky tidbit. Tesla once launched a line of short shorts, literally tiny red shorts, with S3XY printed on the back. As a joke aimed at short sellers, they sold out instantly. The product was promoted on Twitter. Where else? Over time, the platform itself seemed to bend around Musk's orbit. News organizations tracked his tweets like meteorologists predicting a storm. Investors watched for stock movement. Crypto enthusiasts clung to every Dogecoin meme. And journalists? Well, many of them were blocked. Still, Musk insisted his tweets were simply him being transparent. Authentic, he'd say. Direct. And, to his credit, it was the most unfiltered corporate communication in history. 1 part genius, 1 part chaos, 2 parts sleep deprivation. But then, inevitably, came the twist no one asked for. He didn't just want to use Twitter. He wanted to buy it. In April 2022, Musk became the largest shareholder of Twitter Inc. Then, casually, he offered to buy the whole platform for $44 billion. Yes, billion, with a B. At first, it was unclear whether this was another one of Musk's reality-bending stunts. A lark, a meme, a dare, gone too far. Then Twitter said yes. Then Musk said no. Then Twitter sued. Then Musk said yes again. And suddenly, the world's most chaotic user had become the world's most chaotic owner. Historians still argue whether Musk's Twitter acquisition was a masterstroke of long-term strategy or the impulsive culmination of a very expensive midlife crisis. The truth, like most things Muskian, probably involves a whiteboard, a podcast rant, and at least one AI simulation. Once in control, Musk fired top executives, dissolved the board, reinstated banned accounts, and declared himself chief twit. He walked into headquarters carrying a sink, literally a sink, and tweeted, "Let that sink in." Employees did not laugh. Many were laid off. Others resigned. The remaining ones checked Slack nervously and began updating their resumes in incognito mode. The platform's policies, branding, and codebase were overhauled at dizzying speed. The blue checkmark, once a symbol of verified identity, became a subscription feature. A new system was rolled out, then rolled back, then changed, then memed. Users were confused. Advertisers fled. Musk tweeted through it all. Quirky tidbit. At one point, Musk changed the platform's logo to the Doge meme, temporarily turning Twitter into a $44 billion in-joke. Eventually, the platform was rebranded as X, the same name Musk had used for his failed online bank, his Tesla SUV trim level, and indirectly, one of his children, because of course it was. Now, Musk had it all. A car company, a rocket company, a solar company, a brain chip company, and finally, a social media company slowly catching fire in real time. As the world watched, argued, and tweeted about Musk's every move, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about innovation, or freedom of speech, or building the future. This was a man writing the script in real time, 280 characters at a time, with a flamethrower in one hand and a pole in the other. Next up, monkeys, machines, and the part where Elon Musk tries to merge your brain with a USB stick. At some point in every billionaire's life, there comes a moment when launching cars into orbit and disrupting public transportation just isn't enough. You've made electric sedans fart. You've bored tunnels under Las Vegas. You've convinced millions of people that stock splits are exciting. So naturally, the next step is to drill a hole into someone's skull and put a chip in it. Welcome to Neuralink. Founded in 2016, Neuralink is Elon Musk's answer to the age-old question, what if your brain had Bluetooth? The company's stated mission is noble, if a bit unnerving, to develop brain-machine interfaces that can help humans with neurological disorders, paralysis, blindness, memory loss, and eventually allow direct communication between your cortex and your favorite app. Historians still argue whether this is revolutionary medical science or just the world's most overfunded science fiction subplot. Musk has described Neuralink as essential to humanity's survival, especially in a future where artificial intelligence becomes smarter than us, which, to be fair, may have already happened, particularly in customer service. The solution, according to Musk, is to merge with the machines. Not metaphorically, literally, neurons. Meet nanowires. Let's break it down. Neuralink's device, affectionately dubbed the Link, is a coin-sized chip designed to be surgically implanted into your skull. It comes with ultra-thin electrodes, each thinner than a human hair, that fan out into the brain like a cybernetic dandelion. The idea, to detect neural activity and send it wirelessly to a nearby device, like your phone. Or, if things go really well, your Tesla.quirky tidbit. Musk has suggested that with a Neuralink implant, you could one day summon your car just by thinking about it, which is certainly one way to solve the global parking crisis, and also a guaranteed way to confuse dogs. The company's early demonstrations were, predictably, flashy. In 2020, Neuralink unveiled a pig named Gertrude, who had a link implanted in her brain. As Gertrude snuffled around her enclosure, viewers saw live readouts of her neural activity. Essentially, the first TED Talk delivered via pig snout. Reactions ranged from awe to confusion to someone tweeting, "So, the pig is thinking about food. Got it." Still, it worked. The signals were real. The pig seemed fine, and Musk stood proudly on stage, declaring that one day, Neuralink might help paralyzed individuals walk again or restore vision to the blind. Mainstream historical fact. Brain-machine interfaces are not new. Researchers have been experimenting with them for decades. The difference is Neuralink's scale, its ambition, and perhaps most importantly, its robotic sewing machine. Yes, they built a robot to sew the wires into your brain. The surgical robot, looking like the unsettling offspring of a dentist's chair and a Mars rover, is designed to insert the link's threads with extreme precision. It bypasses blood vessels, avoids damaging tissue, and works while you're presumably very unconscious and wondering how you got here from just wanting a better calendar app. Quirky detail. At one point, Neuralink's demo included a robot sewing banana peels. This was meant to demonstrate delicacy. It mostly demonstrated that Neuralink had a very patient intern. But then came the monkey problem. In 2021, Neuralink released a video of a macaque monkey named Pager playing Pong using only his mind. Yes, really. The monkey had been trained to play the game with a joystick, and then Neuralink's system learned to predict his movements. Eventually, the joystick was removed, and Pager kept playing. Musk declared it a breakthrough. The monkey, presumably, was just happy to keep winning. Historians still argue whether this was an ethical triumph or just a cyberpunk fever dream sponsored by a banana reward system. But behind the scenes, trouble brewed. Animal rights organizations raised alarms. Reports surfaced of animal deaths during testing, including monkeys allegedly suffering from complications after implantation. The U.S. Department of Agriculture launched an investigation. Neuralink insisted it was following all protocols. Critics insisted it was following a roadmap designed by H.G. Wells and a bowl of Adderall. Still, Musk pressed on. In 2023, he claimed Neuralink had received FDA approval to begin human trials. The idea to implant the link in patients with paralysis and allow them to control devices with their minds. A noble goal, a terrifying sentence, and something no one saw coming when they bought their first Model 3 quirky tidbit. Musk has said that he would get a Neuralink implant himself once it was proven safe. He has not yet done so, possibly because there's no update feature for regrets. Meanwhile, critics questioned whether Neuralink was overpromising. Again, its timelines, its claims, its Twitter threads filled with grand statements and suspiciously few footnotes. But that's Musk in a nutshell. Half science, half spectacle, 100% unwilling to wait for peer review. And so, as engineers continue to map neural signals and monkeys continue to play video games, Musk talks about a future where thoughts can be texted, memories can be downloaded, and your brain can be upgraded over Wi-Fi. Because apparently, cars and rockets weren't enough. Next, tunnels. Again, but somehow even more boring. At some point in the Elon Musk extended universe, someone probably said, "You've conquered the skies, the roads, and perhaps even the human skull. What's next?" And Elon, perhaps pausing mid-bite of some suspiciously soy-based lunch, said, "Tunnels. Yes, tunnels." The Boring Company was founded in 2016, a year already overflowing with Muskian ventures, digital drama, and Mars PowerPoints. But this one was different. This one was boring. Literally. The name was a pun. The mission was deadpan simple. Solve traffic by digging underground. Why sit in gridlock on the freeway when you could be silently shuttled beneath it in a sleek metal capsule while listening to low bitrate Enya? Historians still argue whether the Boring Company began as a legitimate infrastructure play or simply an elaborate tantrum after Elon got stuck in LA traffic for the third time that week. The first hint of its existence came via, where else? Twitter. Elon tweeted that traffic was driving him nuts and that he was going to build a tunnel, boring machine, and just start digging. Most people assumed this was a joke. 3 weeks later, he had an actual tunnel boring machine and was actually digging. Quirky tidbit. The first tunnel began beneath the SpaceX parking lot in Hawthorne, California. Because when you're the CEO, zoning laws become more like friendly suggestions. Thus began a series of underground escapades that were equal parts civil engineering and startup theater. The company's plan: use small diameter tunnels, about 12 feet across, dig with improved speed and efficiency, transport cars, passengers, or freight via autonomous electric sleds, beat LA traffic with layers. This was not a subway. This was not a train. This was something entirely new. A loop system. Essentially, Teslas in tunnels, whisking passengers along at 150 miles per hour while avoiding surface-level chaos. At least, that was the theory. Mainstream, historical fact. The Boring Company received approval to build the test tunnels, including projects in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Las Vegas. Most didn't get beyond the concept stage. One, however, actually got built. Welcome to Las Vegas. In partnership with the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, the Boring Company constructed a 1.7-mile underground loop beneath the city's convention center. The idea: get people from one side of the sprawling campus to the other in under 2 minutes. And how did it work? Well, you got into a Tesla Model Y, driven, yes, driven, by a human, and then you were chauffeured through a tunnel at about 35 mph, while ambient lights glowed softly, and the driver possibly apologized for the disappointing velocity. So much for 150 Lessersma. Quirky tidbit. The first riders of the Vegas Loop reported that the experience felt a lot like being driven slowly through a parking garage that forgot to add parking. Still, it worked. Mostly. And people tweeted about it. Musk tweeted back. The internet shrugged, applauded, and asked about the next tunnel. Meanwhile, the Boring Company pitched ever more ambitious projects. A tunnel from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. Another from L.A. to Dodger Stadium. Even a loop connecting San Bernardino to Ontario Airport. Most of these collapsed under the weight of permitting, funding, or the realization that tunneling is still really hard. Even with memes, historians still argue whether the Boring Company is an infrastructure revolution or simply a very long, very expensive inside joke. But it made headlines, it sold merch, and, in classic Musk fashion, it sold flamethrowers. Yes, you read that correctly. In 2018, the Boring Company began selling a $500, not a flamethrower, a propane torch housed in a sci-fi gun casing. They sold 20,000 units in days. No refunds, no returns, no clear explanation. Quirky detail. Customs officials told Musk he couldn't ship a flamethrower, so he changed the label to not a flamethrower. Problem solved. As of now, the Boring Company continues to dig, plan, and pitch. New tunnels are proposed every few months, each accompanied by sleek concept renderings, promises of low cost per mile, and soothing declarations about traffic-free futures. But the math often doesn't add up, and the speeds don't match the slides. Even in Las Vegas, the loop's performance is modest. It moves passengers, sure, but not nearly as many as promised. It's less Hyperloop, more hyperlocal Uber ride, underground, and yet it persists because the Boring Company, like most things Musk touches, isn't really about what it claims to be. It's not just about tunnels, it's about control, about building a new transportation model from scratch, about proving that one man, one vision, and one very expensive drill can do what government committees never will. Or maybe it really was just about traffic. Next up, a hostile acquisition, a bird app renamed after his favorite letter, and an empire that might be flying too close to the sun. Of all Elon Musk's unpredictable ventures, rockets, tunnels, flamethrowers, brain chips, the most chaotic may very well be the moment he decided to buy Twitter, not join it, not invest in it, buy it. As in, this website is mine now. Please, hand me the bird. The year was 2022, and Musk had already spent a decade turning Twitter into his personal soapbox. He tweeted about Tesla updates. He tweeted about Dogecoin. He tweeted about the tweets he had just tweeted. At times, it seemed unclear whether Musk's real business was transportation or simply the rapid spread of vibes. But then came the turning point. In March, Musk quietly began buying up Twitter stock. Lots of it. By April, he was the largest individual shareholder, owning over 9% of the company. The board, briefly alarmed, offered him a seat. Musk declined. Instead, he offered to buy the entire platform for $44 billion, a price chosen, many believe, partially because it contained the number 420. Again, historians still argue whether this was a brilliant strategic power move or just a very expensive attempt to impress the ghost of a Reddit thread. At first, the Twitter board resisted. Then, they didn't. They accepted the offer. And then, Musk backed out. He cited bots. He cited spam. He cited issues with transparency and possibly bad vibes. The entire deal seemed like it would collapse into the weird tech billionaire trivia folder. But Twitter's board, presumably guided by lawyers, with very firm handshakes, sued Musk to force the acquisition. Musk, sensing that he might actually lose, returned to the deal like a man re-entering a burning house because he forgot his phone. And so, in October 2022, it happened. Elon Musk bought Twitter, he walked into headquarters carrying a literal kitchen sink, tweeting, "Let that sink in." It was both a pun and a premonition. Quirky tidbit: Musk immediately fired Twitter's top executives, including the CEO, CFO, and head of legal, within minutes of closing the deal. Reportedly, he did this before his car even left the parking lot. He then declared himself Chief Twit and began the single most confusing corporate rebrand in recent memory. First order of business: layoffs. Roughly half of Twitter's workforce was let go in a matter of days. Entire departments vanished. Trust and safety teams were decimated. Employees received notice via email. Some were locked out amid meeting. Mainstream historical fact: one team discovered they had been let go when their company laptops were remotely wiped while they were still in use. There was no offboarding. There was just off. Elon also introduced sweeping policy changes. Verification checkmarks, once symbols of identity, were now available via Twitter Blue, a paid subscription service. This led to a cascade of impersonation accounts. One of them mimicked a major pharmaceutical company and falsely tweeted that insulin was now free. The company lost billions in stock value overnight. Musk later paused the rollout, then relaunched it, then paused it again. Some users were verified. Others were de-verified. Celebrities complained. Brands fled. Musk tweeted memes. Quirky detail: at one point, Elon reinstated Donald Trump's account via public Twitter poll. The vote passed. Trump declined to return. Musk, undeterred, declared, "Vox populi, vox dei," which is Latin for, "I just bought this thing, and I will do what I want." He then rebranded Twitter as X, reviving a name he had long loved, one tied to his old online bank, his car model line, and one of his many children. The iconic bird logo vanished. The term tweet became obsolete. Users were told they were now posting on X, a phrase that somehow felt less futuristic and more like an adult website disclaimer. The user interface changed. The algorithms changed. The entire vibe changed. What had once been a messy but vital platform for news, culture, and very online yelling was now Elon's playground. Historians still argue whether Musk bought Twitter out of principle, boredom, or a deeply Freudian need to own the place where he'd been both worshipped and endlessly ratioed. The financials were bleak. Twitter was losing billions in valuation. Advertising revenue dropped. Content moderation standards evaporated. Users migrated to alternatives. Lawsuits mounted. Musk doubled down. Quirky tidbit: at one point, Musk changed the block function's behavior so that users could only mute others, not actually prevent them from interacting. The move was met with confusion, and naturally, more memes. Through it all, Musk remained defiant. He insisted Twitter, X, would become an everything app, capable of messaging, banking, video, and probably controlling your thermostat if you gave it enough time. Employees described the work environment as chaotic, underpaid, and often dictated by Elon's late-night whims. Features were built overnight, then canceled by sunrise. Some managers learned about new product launches by reading Elon's tweets. Still, Musk was undeterred. To him, Twitter wasn't broken. It was just unfinished, and only he could finish it. Next, the legacy, what it all means, and whether this was brilliance, madness, or simply the slow, echoing yawn of a man who couldn't stop building. And now, we arrive at the end, or at least the part of the Elon Musk story where the details become increasingly difficult to separate from myth, meme, and marketing deck. He is no longer just a CEO or an engineer or a man who once crash tested a McLaren F1 against gravity and hubris. He is a legacy, or possibly a brand, or a Twitter account with a rocket company attached. Let us attempt to sum it all up. Elon Musk, born in Pretoria in 1971, now sits atop a tangled empire of ambition and contradiction. Tesla, the electric car company once scoffed at by the automotive industry, is now worth more than most of it combined. It mass produces sedans, SUVs, and Cybertrucks, eventually, and leads the global charge, literally, toward electrification. It is also regularly late on delivery timelines, prone to quality control issues, and famously allergic to unionization. SpaceX, once a laughingstock of flameouts and broken boosters, now dominates the orbital launch market. It has launched astronauts to the International Space Station, dropped satellites into constellation formation, and landed rockets on autonomous barges in the ocean. Because why not? It dreams of Mars. It settles for Starlink. And its most important product may be the idea that space isn't just for governments anymore. Neuralink still promises mind-machine interfaces. The Boring Company still promises faster tunnels. X, formerly Twitter, now promises everything and delivers notifications. Historians still argue whether Musk is the Edison of our era or its P.T. Barnum, a genius building the future, or a showman selling tickets to it. He is idolized by tech bros, feared by regulators, and muted by half of California. Quirky tidbit: Musk has described himself as an engineer, not a businessman, yet he is now the wealthiest businessman alive, at least on paper and at least on Tuesdays, when Tesla stock is up. He claims to want to save humanity by colonizing other planets, digitizing consciousness, and powering civilization with sunshine. He also once sold Tesla-branded tequila in a lightning bolt-shaped bottle. Because, as always, the mission is grand. The execution is idiosyncratic. Mainstream historical fact. In 2021, Musk officially surpassed Jeff Bezos to become the richest person on Earth. He celebrated with a meme, then lost the title, then got it back. The cycle continues. As for his public image, it is fluid. To some, he is the world's greatest innovator. To others, an erratic billionaire, too powerful for his own good. To others still, he is just that guy who keeps changing the Twitter logo. And what of his personal life? Well, multiple children, multiple companies, multiple tweets per hour. Quirky detail: he once named his child XEA12, later simplified, slightly, to X. When asked how to pronounce it, Musk gave an answer that only raised further questions. At press time, Elon continues to do everything. He tweets. He launches rockets. He sells perfume. He proposes colony timelines. He ponders AGI Risk. He shows up at video game conventions and whispers about next-gen chips. He speaks of freedom, destiny, and traffic reduction with the same tone you might use to explain a toaster. And so, the legacy endures. It's a legacy of audacity, velocity, and the unshakable belief that rules are more like guidelines, and that the future is not something we wait for, but something we prototype. And while that future may not arrive exactly on time, or with all the promised features, it will eventually show up, probably in beta, with patch notes and a meme. And now, as the tale slows to its natural crawl, you may find your mind drifting from Martian colonies and self-driving cars to silvery rockets beneath Texas skies, to a man typing at midnight, reshaping industries. In between cryptic tweets, this was the story of Elon Musk, a story not of smooth trajectories, but of stumbles, sparks, and sudden liftoffs, of blueprints sketched on napkins, and business plans delivered mid-live stream. He is a contradiction wrapped in lithium and logos, a futurist grounded by deadlines, a CEO whose schedule seems allergic to naps, but who builds machines that dream. For him, you followed him through boardrooms and bunkers, Silicon Valley and subterranean tunnels, from the echoing halls of Wall Street to the padded silence of low Earth orbit. And now, it's quiet. No more product announcements. No more shareholder letters disguised as performance poetry. Just the soft hum of neural data and the whir of a Tesla fan cooling a dashboard, too clever for its own good. Let that hum soothe you. Let the endless scroll of ambition finally pause. And if your brain still buzzes, remember, even Elon logs off eventually. So breathe, close your eyes, and drift into dreams, not of balance sheets, but of stars, of stillness, of a future waiting patiently beneath the noise. End of script. Sweet dreams.